Ladies and gentlemen, hello to you. I'm Olivier Biscaye. I'm editorial director of the newspaper La Provence. I'm delighted to be with you here for this roundtable to talk about territorial divides. And it's a thrilling subject. We're going to talk about many subjects during the next hour with a charming panel. We'll be talking about territories and regions of France. And I'm going to present to you my panelists in a few moments. So we've got Philippe PALAZZI, your Chief Executive Officer of Casino Group. Thank you very much for being with us here. Véronique, President of Numeum. Thank you for here. We've got also Stéphane Lefay, Director General of Grand Paris Aménagement, Frédéric SOUILLOT, General Secretary of Force Ouvrière, and Jacques, Chairman of the CCR. Thank you very much for being with us here for this round table. You're all going to be talking about a specific subject which is of interest to you in your business activity, and then we'll talk together. But first of all, I'm going to hand the floor to Nathalie, who's an economist and a professor at Lille University, and she's going to introduce the subject to us. Hello. Territories have to rise to quite a number of challenges that vary in function of their geographical location, their history, and their business development strategies in place. Medical desertification, access to health care, trouble with social services, demographics, populations in isolation, islets of poverty, access to transport, ecological transition. And so this is kind of worrying because we see there are certain metropolises that are growing and innovating, whereas many other rural areas and medium-sized towns or neighborhoods are suffering for a lack of employment and poor social services. Some territories are suffering from all kinds of vulnerability. So the topic is these differences fuel a feeling of being left by the wayside for those people who live in the countryside or on the outskirts of a town. And they're also a central issue for cohesion. They make people feel angry, abandoned out in the countryside, but also inside the cities and underprivileged areas. And there have been some social movements recently, and there have been electoral results which express that. So tackling territorial divide should be a priority. And so we're going to have to address what kind of levers are at stake. I'm going to talk about public levers, for example. There are a certain number of things which have been implemented, reinforcement of local services with the special units in different neighborhoods, different measures to combat medical deserts, and the developing of these medical centers where different disciplines are represented. Sometimes there are vehicles that can be rented out at a very cheap price, mixing categories of social classes in school, for example, and different initiatives to train and to employ people tied in with the unions, businesses and training establishments. The problem is, in concrete terms, what is being observed is that we need ambitious policies that are coordinated and that reflect a local situation. And that is only possible if you have an overall regional planning policy, which is spearheaded by the state, relying on an analysis of the local situation and in partnership with the local councils, the territorial councils, with the necessary financial means, and of course, all of the different local players involved. i.e. businesses, councillors, union representatives, associations, and the local population. So that demands a lot of coordination of all of the different players, and it also requires something we tend to forget in France, that is systematically, regularly analysing the efficiency of these measures put in place. So if you fail to reduce territorial inequalities, that will obviously lead to an increase in populist voting. Thank you very much, Nathalie, for that introduction and for those ideas for subjects to be developed during this debate. We're now going to go round to all of our panelists. Each person has 4 minutes to talk about a key idea and to talk about what you've done on this theme. Philippe, PALAZZI, will start with you, Chief Executive Officer of the Casino Group. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming out in such hot temperatures. We really appreciate your valiant efforts. So, territorial divide is something which we're really interested in because we work in the neighbourhoods. All of our franchisees, for example, are in direct contact with the reality out in the field. So I really am convinced that we have as shopkeepers, as traders, we have a role to play in healing this divide in the different areas. The Casino Group is evolving. We are now focusing on local shops with brands that can be seen in little villages, whether we're talking about Bival, Spa, Casino, or Monoprix and Franprix and Naturalia. So in France, in the provinces, you have to drive 15 minutes to go shopping, to have access to consumer goods. And often our brands in the provinces are the last remaining shops to be found within a radius of several kilometers. There is a common point here, and this is a divide that we're not really paying attention to. This is the divide of isolation. Many people, whether they're in a big city or out in the provinces, people feel alone, and a local shop is the only point of contact, the only social link that these individuals can have on a day-to-day basis. And I really do believe we have a role to play here, a role in society. Casino can play that role, and we will continue to grow in the territories, in small villages. There are 20,000 localities in France with no shops in it. So our elders need to be able to stay in their villages. We want them to live in their villages where they've grown up and lived for many years. And if they are to do that, we have to provide the necessary services. Often the state has deserted these regions. There are no post offices in villages anymore. It's very difficult to find a cash point in a village nowadays to get some cash out or to deliver a parcel or to have a parcel delivered. So that's why Casino is committed to the mayors of different villages, etc., to provide these services which are just lacking in our small towns and villages. I love the provinces here in France, and I'm committed to helping them. We want to create links. We want to reinforce social connections, and our shops can help to combat that sensation of isolation. And this year we have created a foundation which is fighting to strengthen social links. This is the Casino Foundation is there to knit links, because we know that it does us good to do good to others. Thank you very much. Philippe, Véronique Tournaire. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to talk about the digital universe. My message is that today we don't see digital technologies not as a challenge, but as a social and environmental issue, for example. Of course, it's a huge lever for helping and break the glass ceiling of the territorial divide. So I would say that digital technologies are an opportunity for territories to recreate links. I'm going to give you a few examples. It can open up territories which are blocked off. It can make a metropolis more appealing, makes them more attractive. It can generate employment and jobs. It can make it easier to access public services. Where there are no premises available for those services. A telemedicine, for example, is a good idea if there's not a doctor's surgery in the village. I'm going to use two examples. We could mention many, but the first one is the Reunion Island. I went there on business, not on holiday, last October, to meet the economic players on the island. And in France, we've got a major plus point with our connectivity. So 94% of the region is well connected, and that's a huge opportunity for them because it means that they can connect. They are isolated on their little island, but they can connect to the entire Indian Ocean and Africa. They can trade with Mayotte, Africa, etc. And that's a huge opportunity. And I could see with my own eyes that there is a very dynamic business opportunity. And so digital tools are essential for that. Another example on mainland France, let's look at the town of Dijon. Dijon has decided that digital technology is an attraction, will attract people. There's a project which enables people to have access to a certain number of services at Dijon. It's a smart city, so they can optimize the traffic flow and help access to the emergency services. Dijon is an agricultural area, and so they can now look at the agriculture of the future thanks to artificial intelligence. So I would really encourage different territories to take inspiration from the Reunion Island and Dijon, but there are other areas, of course, which are models. Not everything happens in Paris. In the digital section, there's a cybersecurity trade show, which is so important for our resilience, and it is taking place in Lille. And closer to here, Aix and Marseille are often rivals, but in Marseille you've got a huge AI event, the AI Anne, which connects the entire territory to everything pertaining to AI. So I'm not saying that digital technology is the be-all and end-all. No, it's like a drug. It can be positive, but it can also be toxic. You have to have the right dose, and you have to respect that dosage. And the three pieces of information which I would recommend for the dosage is, first, you need the right infrastructure. And in France, that's not always the case, but in France, well, we are hyper-connected. We can be proud of that. That really is a huge plus point for different territories. Second, we have to develop responsible, inclusive, trustworthy digital technology. Digital technology which goes hand in hand with the environmental transition. Digital technology can be a huge lever for industrialists to help them with their environmental transition. And the third point, and this is teamwork, getting public players and private players to work together. I've got a badge here on my dress. The digital ecosystem is a team effort. There are 80 associations in France working in the digital field. They're all over the country, 2, 3, 4 in each part of the country. 80 associations is very difficult to coordinate. So what we've decided to do is to federate ourselves, not making yet another association, but a collective group. It's a team, if you like, so that we can act together and create footbridges nationally and between the regions. So I'm going to focus on creating a network of regions. That's what my idea that I want to share with you, without saying that it is the one and only solution, but I think it's an essential chain, a link in the chain to breaking the glass ceiling. Thank you. Let's move on to Stéphane Defay, General Manager of Grand Paris Aménagement. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I'm going to talk about housing. And all of our other human activities depend on housing. And it is a terrible cause of divide, of division, even today. I'm going to take you to Bordeaux into 2010, 2020, that decade there. In that decade, Bordeaux had about 20,000 new residents per year, an absorption capacity of about 10,000, so only half of them could be accommodated for. So 10,000 people were having to find accommodation elsewhere. If you know the region, you know that that decade between Bordeaux and Arcachon, there were lots of little estates popping up all over the place. I'm going to give you a statistic here. 12% of divorced couples, more than 12% more couples divorce in the suburbs rather than in the city. But then they have to travel to go to work, drop off the children, and that gobbles up on their time to build the links with their families, etc. So if I'm taking this illustration of 12% more people who are divorced living in the area now. And access to housing is key here. It's not only a question of poorly housing people. Of course, poor housing is a subject on its own right. But I would like to say that there are two or three things at stake here. So, housing policy in general has generally been pretty poor over recent years. Over the last 15 years, we have constructed 2.5 new houses per new household. However, we have poor housing situations which continue. Now we have a system, one of the best performing systems in the world in terms of social housing. It's a very valuable tool with some professional players involved in investment and also in managing these local facilities. Of course, there are difficulties linked with this. And among those difficulties, there is that link between social housing and the territory. There are all kinds of myths which have been bandied about. But fortunately, we have certain safety barriers in place. During COVID, we would go out of our houses to applaud nurses, etc. But those same professionals are having difficulty getting housing, so we need our housing policy to be more anchored in the territory and to have support of territorial engineering, and that is sadly lacking. And that is a great concern if we hope to move forward on that subject. Thank you very much, Stéphane Defay. Frédéric Souillot, General Secretary of Force Ouvrière, a union. Over to you now. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, territorial divide. Well, it's an observation. It exists. Now it has to be a general interest mission for the state. So how are we going to coordinate the state, local councils, town halls, employers, employees, and above all, and this was a round table which took place earlier on in tent number 1, how can we reindustrialize and re-employ? So wherever there's a territorial divide, we have strong industrial basins. Every time you lose an industrial job, that's 4 induced jobs. 3 induced directly, shops and services, and there's a public services job also which is lost. And the public when you lose industry 3 or 4 years later, then you've lost your tax office, your post office, and you're starting to lose hospital beds. So what we have to dream up is how we can get the planets aligned. The observation has been made, but what do we do now? How do we move in a less vertical direction, in a more transversal direction in our territories? We've got an example close to here. We've got in Salon de Provence, there's a health village. Salon had a little village, or rather, the hospital was crumbling down and it was too old. And so we got everyone around the table, the unions, mine included, because we're the majority union in Salon. I met the Prime Minister, who brought the health services around, the local councils, the town halls, citizens, and a few weeks ago, we have started to build our public-private health village. There's another institution which is creating a similar village to reduce the social divide, and it involves shops, a doctor, a kindergarten, a nursery. And so if someone loses a job, we can help them out and we can reduce this territorial divide. However, it's a big job. We've got a new commissioner who's just been appointed. I hope he's going to be more efficient than the last one, and I hope we can have a good plan put in place. Well, the former one has been promoted. Yeah, but he didn't do a very good job on our plan, on our scheme. Okay, Jacques Le Pape, let's finish with you, chairman of the CCR. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. To the reinsurance fund, we manage national catastrophe funds. And it's a good example of the territorial divide. And when people are in their territories, they need it and they have a problem because they are suffering from a big flood, for example. And so we, over the last 42 years, because the fund has been around for 42 years, we have come up with solutions to problems we've talked about already. Because here we need to have a very financial approach, because how can we use the 2 billion we have each year to compensate these people who suffered a violent event? So over the years, we have got partnerships with insurance companies, all kinds of reinsurance treaties here in France. And thanks to this network, as Philippe PALAZZI said earlier on in his supermarket chain, we have client advisor who takes care of people when they have a problem. There are some territories which are more heavily impacted by natural catastrophes. And as I said earlier on, there are some territories where we have to come up with rapid solutions to a catastrophe. However, what we note is this public-private partnership works very well. It's been working well for 42 years. 90% of communes here in France have benefited from it over the last 42 years. And we provide solutions to this divide. If we take a look at the most typical case, i.e. the overseas departments, they pay under 2% to the regime and they benefit for over 10% of the compensation. In insurance, we work on individual cases where fragility has crept in because of a natural catastrophe, but we also guarantee solidarity between the different territories when necessary, as long as the financial balance allows for it. So it's technical, but it can be done. So when there is a catastrophe, the fund works well. The question is, how can we do more? How can we do better using our expertise and our network? Well, over recent months, we've been thinking about how we use our network and the insurance and reinsurance mechanism to enable those who have ideas of how they can adapt their home and render it more robust, how we can help them to do that. And we would like to create one-stop shops in different town halls. I met with a lot of irony when I talk about that, but we really are keen on public-private partnerships. We've got this huge budget which is available to businesses who are active or who want to be active in this area of adapting homes to climate change. And this fund can finance businesses that will come up with solutions. So the same way that we have our network of insurers to spend that 2 billion fund, we are constructing a network of businesses, territory by territory, in a practical manner, in a pragmatic way. Public-private partnership will bring solutions of adaptation. Thank you very much, Jacques. Thank you to all 5 of you for this first round. Now let's open up the discussion between you all. Frédéric, I'll come back to you. You've all mentioned that the territorial divide exists. You've said that. You've made that observation, but there are observations, and you've said that too. However, Frédéric Souillot, that's not the general feeling we have here. In France, we don't feel that there are solutions. In France, here we have the feeling of being abandoned. And all kinds of studies are showing that, to the point that many leaders recently, through different ministries, have tried to come up with solutions. Yet, the French still have the feeling that this divide is still so evident. So what's wrong? Well, the thing is, we're often just communicating. And when you cannot show the facts at state level, then that can be converted into a unit for public services, which doesn't cover all of the solutions, but which is starting to bring local public services. But when you're a citizen, what we want is for people to take care of us when we need it. We've lost that notion of the collective value and interest. Earlier on, you were saying that essential services in COVID, yes, we were applauding those professionals providing those services. Once COVID was over, we put them in the spotlight again, but saying this time that you cost too much money and you're creating huge debt for the country. So how can we create jobs in territories? How can we be more focusing on Paris? Or how can we have more verticality? So there was a book published which was very successful, and it showed that everything was focused on Paris, but things have evolved since then. There's decentralization, and we have different departments which have been setting up in the different counties. But we see that politicians are on a kind of carousel. You have the person at the head of your scheme, he's been replaced. A minister will be there for 5 years. Are we not lacking someone with a longer-term view? We need to roll out these ambitions, to plan better for our different territories.
Of course, since the 5-year plan, we're constantly, for the French presidency, we're always voting. So we don't think anything about anything long-term because it's only short-term. You're talking about housing a few minutes ago. Still 2 years ago, we wanted to stop the action, the unequal access to housing. So now we're talking about a 25-year plan, 17 billion. The first owner of the houses in France, housing units, is Action Logement. Billions of housing units. And the state is saying, let's start making it equal. Let's make it on public association, and that's very short term because you get a loan and you got to reimburse it in 18 months. Stéphane Defay, I wanted to make you think about that. What is the urban planning? We talk about the Greater Paris for many years. We took our time to do that, for this project. It's necessary, like Frédéric Souillot said. We talked about housing, mobility, which is one of the words that haven't been mentioned yet. It's part of the feeling of abandonment and divide and territorial divide. How do you manage the longer term things? Greater Paris, I'm not going to talk about Greater Paris and the urban planning, but how can you think about this project, which was a way to rebalance the planning in the Île-de-France region, not only focused on the central city, on the capital city? For this policy, the state managed hand in hand with the local authorities and the region in de France in particular to do, since we're looking at major investments, they have doubled the transport network for Paris, for the Greater Paris region. It's quite impressive. And we have a powerful tool to reduce the territorial divide. So if we look at all the cost that was invested for the Olympics, but not only for the Olympics, for the everyday life of all the people who live in the Greater Paris area, we're looking at, it was clearly taking into account. When I go to Bordeaux, the distance and mobility is, and the absence of mobility is a divide in itself. I really believe in the trilogy between state, local authorities, and companies, private companies. We cannot turn them against each other. The mayor is the one who has the legitimacy on the ground, and we can see that those are the elected officials that the French like the most, and for right reasons. There is a whole engineering that is missing on many territories, and the state can bring it. That's what we do more and more, and not only in the Greater Paris area. And the companies have to be present because they're the one who create the value. We need to create a framework to make them responsible, and they can be heard as well. And when I brought up housing today is one of the fundamental difficulties of companies to recruit and to keep people in the region, to avoid what you were mentioning earlier on, which is this slow erosion of the fundamental services, whether they are private or public. The retail business is part of those services that we all need. I would like to say a word on what you're saying. We need us, economic actors, me, business leader, we need that our policies are in long term, that they have a clear strategy for the country to relaunch the economy, employment, value creation, and that we can continue to invest and to believe in it. And that's what we're missing right now. And I'd like to open up the debate on precarity. There's some precarity and that we see. We could see that some people are in the street, there's some beggars, and it's under our eyes, and it's often addressed by associations, by public authorities. But there's another precarity that we don't see, that is the silent one, is the mother of children with a child is isolated, and she goes buy food and she leaves something on the counter because she can't afford it. It's a student who can't afford to have 3 meals a day, for example. It's a retiree who doesn't eat protein because it's too expensive and he only eats the protein once a week. And all this silent precarity creates a divide within our society. And that's why in our group and all the shopkeepers are trying as much as we can to help people to make it disappear, to make this silent precarity disappear, because it can really easily turn into exclusion. There's a very interesting concept of social link. If you open up a shop, it's a duty for your group to stay in the regions that are very far away from the great urban centers. Yes, there are 20,000 towns that don't have shops and they're isolated, and that's why we innovated by relaunching a nomad concept, a nomad grocery store that goes around several villages and brings not only first necessity products, but also to feed the people, but to create a link as well around this nomad grocery store, where people like to go and chat, and that creates social link. Before I give the floor to Véronique, Philippe said it. Maybe you were mentioning long term. That's what Frédéric SOUILLOT said as well. What are the blocking points that need to be lifted? Because the long term is a course, is an ambition, but to make sure that it works, we need to, if you're in charge of a big group like Casino, We need to suppress a few blockages. And what are you expecting from public authorities to promote this type of retail shopping? We need to promote entrepreneurship. Often, shops are in the hand of an entrepreneur. And very often, it's often a local, I like that expression, he lives in the village or in the neighborhood where he sets up his shop. So we need him to be able to take risks and to be really committed with other shopkeepers so they can open their shop, they can modernize, they can upkeep it, and the state and the local authorities have to commit on the long term and not something that changes from one election to the next. Véronique, what do you want to say about this? Yes, I wanted to go back on the topic of inclusion, and digital is a lever as well, but we'll often talk about the digital divide as well. It's a real priority to help this digital transition and not to leave anybody behind. We talked a lot for many months about AI. There's a huge challenge to support all the citizens and all the companies to harness this technology, because we won't be able to do without it. So there's a beautiful collaboration between the state, the regions, and economic actors, which is the OZIAC plan that was announced on Tuesday, with a will for coordination to activate the topic of citizens, companies, and also on inclusion. Our industry is feeling very concerned. We're lacking skills every year, and we know that we won't be able to solve the equation with all the people graduated with diploma that was created for our industry. And we made a partnership with the France Travail, which is the unemployed agency in France, for people who are far away from our sector. We source them and we identify them. And then our company identifies the journeys that are very well adapted to these people, and then our company commits to hire them. So it's quite modest, but it's a program that is deployed in the territories. It's not a national program. It exists in each of the territories. The agent of France Travail are on the ground, and over time, when they're deployed in all regions, they should allow the creation of between 10 to 15,000 jobs a year. It's not going to solve the whole problem of employment in France, but it will contribute to it. I wanted to talk about reindustrialization as well. We need to support the reindustrialization of the regions, and digital technology is a lever to do that, because the future is digital. So we're very committed with the individuals actors, which are SMEs, to use the digital tool to become more competitive. It's a major pillar for us. Thank you very much. Jacques Le Pape, maybe what do you want to say about this theme of long-term, more than ever? Particularly in this region where you have a lot of climate hazards. Yeah, time is essence, and it makes the robustness of the device that we can put in place. In our plan for natural hazards, one of the way we deal with those situations is the plans to mitigate floods and to prevent floods. It's not something that is done between two ministerial decrees. We need to work on long term. We need to work long term, find the right analysis. It requires a local consultation, and then find the right way to articulate it. It's the Barnier Fund that finances a lot part of it. It's a long term and changing some parameters to adapt things to the needs of people. There's climate change, so we should probably compensate people better if they're affected, but keep a structure to make sure that it works out over time. We mentioned the triangle of state, public authorities and corporations. We didn't talk enough about citizens. What role do citizens must play? And to reduce social divides. So all the grievances that you remember, of the yellow vest that you remember easily, we can all check them out. We're actually publishing a special report on the grievances in Provence. What do they say? What do they talk about? They talk about not being listened to, not being taken into account, the reality of the citizens. Frédéric SOUILLOT, I feel like maybe you have the same impression, but there's never been as many tools as now in our country to integrate the words of citizens. There are many of you who want some of them to disappear, some with the ZDF, of the Césaire. Where are you at there? All the tools that work, the abandonment, isolation, the tools are there. It's like all the grievances and all the rest is what do we make of it once we get the information? Because you can even add some tools, no matter what the laws are about. But at the end of the day, if you don't do anything with it, the issue of listening and recognizing so and so doesn't go anywhere. So we want to do a neighborhood shop of trade unions. So locally, so local unions. So for the employees that have an issue, a question, or just they feel like chatting, because we closed up too many bars in towns. Because very often, well, you know, the theory of people speaking at the counter of the bar is true. It helped you out. It helps you out putting things in perspectives. So if we open up those little stores or shops or offices, they come to us and they talk to us and they say, well, I filled up such and such, document, and I'm expecting for an answer for something that they're expecting from the state, and they can talk to us about it. If we want to break with the divide, we need to be cross-cutting and be close to the ground. You were talking about reinsurance and investment and all that. It's the same. You mentioned the Barnier Fund. The Barnier Fund, it was long-term. It still exists, and it's been created 25 years ago. So there are tools. We don't harness them. We don't use them because we don't have the information of where it could lead us. On AI and digital and industry has changed a lot with digital, AI. We don't have a choice there. And if the citizen says that he has less neighborhood shops, but he orders all the time on platforms, so what is that? There's no... It's a schizophrenic. We have pressure, they have pressure, and they feel like the Republic is more individualistic. And in the relationship with citizens, you were mentioning the social link. Is it an approach integrated within your group? You're often asked by elected officials, by citizens, by associations who ask you to come and open up shop because you're a brand that is well known in France. When we launched this nomad grocery shop, we're at the fair of mayors, the trade fair of mayors in Paris. It's really like a little truck which brings food to all the little towns, and it had a big impact with all the mayors of France, and they all asked to have this truck in their villages. So we're testing it in the Loire region. We have a test that has been satisfying. So we have a great franchisee who's actually using an existing Vival store, and he serves about 12 towns around. So local food and local produce is very popular. And so when he starts going around in his truck, he buys eggs in one farm and he distributes them throughout his journey. So we need to bring grocery shops to those who don't have any. And the truck, as we had in the 50s after the war, becomes very modern again and very useful. Nathalie, can you give us a first recap before we give the floor to the room? I have the difficult task of doing a recap. I retain a few elements that you seem to all agree on. The necessity to work long term. I think you all agree of that. It's not, unfortunately, the time frame that politicians use. You talked about the Barnier Fund and a few things. The private-public partnership with the funding of major infrastructures, whether digital, transport, electricity grid, and the collective association between private and public actors, the necessity to have a consultation of all actors and not forget to associate the population in it to those discussions. And I would add how important companies are in this reduction of territorial divide, and the question of precarity. We mentioned it, but precarity, there's visible precarity, and there's also, I like what you said, the silent precarity that Mr. PALAZZI you noticed, and that we can see also in our universities. So, small recap, first recap. Thank you very much, good. So now we're going to take questions from the room. Do you have any? Is there a mic going around? We have a question in the first row. Thank you very much. You go ahead. Hello, I am Alexandre Pastor. I created an association that teaches young people on politics, and I do some promotion of the youth at the Cercle. How do we make sure that it comes from the ground and not from Paris? And how do we make sure that it comes from that local solutions can then be rolled out at the regional level? It doesn't only come from companies coming from Paris, coming on the ground without knowing the territories, and so without having a real answer to that really addresses the local needs. Stéphane Defaille, you have the floor. You are mentioning something very important, and that is also similar to the divide between the elite and the reality on the ground. What do regions need? They need engineering to implement a political vision that is built locally. They don't need to be imposed a vision from the top. So these tools are needed, but also we need to advance all the initiatives that exist and promote them. I invite you to look at something that is a bit strange, the Federation of Things That Work. It's a concept which took a very simple idea, which is to go in the regions, to point at one mayor who, because he wants to save costs on some land, he plants a particular plant, and to do some things that is very easy to reproduce. When we talk about the divide, there's a word that we didn't mention, which is fundamental. It's how do we create solidarity relationships between various territories. We experimented a twinning of land between Saint-Dizier and Aubervilliers, two cities. Saint-Dizier had a hard time attracting real estate actors to build. Nothing had been built in 40 years. Nobody wanted to take a chance on it. So we told them, whoever comes and built in Aubervilliers will also build in Saint-Dizier. What is interesting is not that we now have a few housing units built in Saint-Dizier. It's because from this gesture, a lot of solidarity was formed between the two cities in the sports field, in cultural field, and exchange of know-hows. And I think that's a great way and a concrete way to be cross-cutting, and not only coming from a vertical system. Yes, another question? Thank you. I would like to make two comments. One to the person who's in charge of Casino. It's true that the neighborhood stores play a fundamental role. I was elected in my city for 20 years, and I understood that you're really playing that role, and so congratulations. And for you, madam, I have a comment. I'm not sure that the tech, like you call it, can bring solutions in all cases. Imagine a guy who's in the island of Reunion Island, if he's living in a shed and he barely has running water. I live there. Tech is important, but it's not... it's good. It doesn't apply to everyone. And then I go back to what should we do to do urban planning. I believe in the combination of state from the state and local authority. This morning I took the bus, the local bus, and I took the bus from the metropolis. If I came from a different place, I would have taken the bus from the region council. But those systems don't work together, so the public services of transport in the Bouches-du-Rhône department is not functioning correctly. So redefining the skills and maybe creating, as like in Paris, a whole unit to deal with all the transport of the region, that would work. So I forgot what else I want to say, so I give back the floor. Véronique, on the digital question. So we're aligned because I said that it was not the solution for everything. What I was trying to show is that it is also a lever to help those changes in the territories. But there are some cases where the tech is not going to be the solution. The tech sector should not replace the human. We talk a lot about AI, and I like to talk about augmented intelligence, because this tool should increase the humans and not replace it. But you're right, in some cases where the tech is not the solution, and it's okay. But in many cases, the tech is the solution, and I think that today we're not open enough on different use cases, and we don't accelerate enough on those. Thank you. Another question from the room. No? Thank you very much. Nathalie, maybe you want to have the last word before we give our speakers a round of applause. Yes, the last word. I would like to say that we should work together and have all the actors working together, the state, local authorities, companies, trade unions, associations, get the population on board, keeping and maintaining the solidarity between the regions throughout territorial meshing. And also, you were right, redefining the skills of the region and maybe tap into this multi-layer cake that reduces the local initiatives. Thank you very much, and please give them a warm round of applause. Thank you very much.